They thought it was just another ordinary night at a crowded bar. The music was loud, the laughter easy, and the clinking of glasses blended into a rhythm of people just trying to escape their worries for a few hours. But then, silence cut through the noise. A silence heavy enough to crush the room. Two young black men, identical twins, had just walked in. They weren't causing trouble. They weren't even drinking yet. Just two brothers, standing shoulder to shoulder, looking for a seat. But the stares came fast. And then, the uniforms followed. The cops didn't come in smiling. They didn't ask questions. They came in with hands resting dangerously close to their holsters, eyes locked on the twins as if they were criminals walking into the scene of a crime. Whispers rose around the bar, a cocktail of fear, prejudice, and disbelief. ID, now. Hands where we can see them. The demands flew before the brothers could even speak. A simple night out was turning into a nightmare. Not because of anything they had done, but because of the color of their skin. Every second ticked louder. The twins knew the script. Black men cornered by authority never get the benefit of the doubt. Every movement, every word, every breath could be twisted into a threat. Their hearts pounded, not just with fear, but with the exhaustion of knowing this wasn't the first time, and it might not be the last. One officer leaned closer, his voice sharp and dripping with suspicion. The whole bar watched, waiting for the confrontation to explode. The twins stood frozen, caught between silence that could damn them and words that could be weaponized against them. And yet, the cops didn't know what they were walking into. They didn't know the truth about who these men really were. They didn't know that behind the quiet stares and calm restraint stood years of training, discipline, and leadership that could change the entire course of this encounter. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because before anyone could understand their story, these young men were just two black faces in a room full of judgment. And that's the cruel reality. In America, the uniform you wear, the title you've earned, the sacrifices you've made for your country, all of it can vanish in the eyes of those who only see the color of your skin. So, the question is this: what happens when power meets prejudice? What happens when the people sworn to protect and serve push two brothers to the edge, not realizing they're about to challenge men unlike anyone they've ever faced? Stay with me, because this night would not only expose the ugly face of racism, but also reveal a shocking truth that left everyone in that bar stunned. Before that night, before the flashing lights and raised voices, before the judgment that filled the room like smoke, the twins lived two very different sides of the same story. To most people, Marcus and Malik were just brothers, born minutes apart, inseparable since childhood, and bound by a loyalty only twins could understand. They grew up in a neighborhood where kids learned early that survival wasn't promised, and respect had to be earned twice as hard if your skin was black. But what few knew was that these two young men had carved out paths few dared to dream of. Marcus, the older by 6 minutes, wore the weight of responsibility like a second skin. Discipline defined him. He had risen through the ranks with determination that silenced doubters, earning the title of captain. Malik, his mirror in face but not always in temperament, carried a sharper edge, bold, fearless, and driven. He wasn't just part of the Navy SEALs, he was a commander. Both had devoted their lives to service, to honor, to the belief that protecting others was worth the sacrifices they had made. Yet outside the uniform, stripped of medals and insignia, they were still seen first as black men. And no matter what battles they had fought abroad, no matter how many lives they had saved, home soil carried a different kind of battlefield, one where the rules were unfair, and victory was never guaranteed. On this night, their intent was simple, a rare chance to unwind. No missions, no briefings, no weight of leadership pressing down on their shoulders. Just two brothers stepping into a bar like anyone else, looking for laughter, for release, for a few hours of feeling normal. But normal had always been complicated. They were used to sideways stares when they walked into spaces not meant for them. They were used to the whispers, the lowered voices, the suspicion that followed them like a shadow. They didn't need to be told the unspoken truth. In places like this, they were tolerated, not welcomed. Still, they walked in with confidence. Because they had earned it. Because deep down, they believed that after everything they had given, after all they had sacrificed, maybe, just maybe, the world would treat them with the dignity they had fought for. The bar was alive with music, with laughter, with glasses clinking in lazy rhythms. Marcus scanned the room with the instinct of a man who never turned his guard fully off. Malik, ever the lighter spirit, cracked a joke under his breath, nudging his brother as if daring him to relax. For a brief moment, they looked like any other young men, two friends out for a night, bonded by blood and history. But beneath the ease, tension always lingered. They knew how quickly nights like this could turn. How fast a simple glance could shift into confrontation. They knew that being in the wrong place at the wrong time was enough to end everything. And that's where the tragedy of their story lies. Because Marcus and Malik weren't just soldiers, weren't just leaders, they were sons, brothers, men who loved and laughed and carried the weight of expectations heavier than most could imagine. And yet, their lives could be reduced in an instant to stereotypes, to suspicion, to targets of authority. The setup for what would happen next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. Subtle. Hidden in the way people's eyes followed them across the room. The way conversations dipped when they passed. The way the bartender hesitated a second too long before asking what they'd like to drink. It wasn't new. It wasn't surprising. But it was enough. Enough to let them know the night wouldn't end as easily as it began. And as they took their seats, unaware of the storm building outside those four walls, the truth was simple. Marcus and Malik had faced danger before, but this would be different. Because this time, the battlefield wasn't oceans away. It wasn't marked by flags or missions. This battlefield was right here, in their own country, where the enemy wasn't foreign, but familiar. And when the door swung open and those officers stepped inside, the story of two brothers was about to collide with the story of America itself. The sound of the door swinging open cut through the music like a blade. Two officers stepped inside, boots heavy on the worn wooden floor. Their eyes scanned the bar with a cold precision, and they landed instantly on the twins. The laughter died. The air thickened. Every set of eyes seemed to turn in the same direction, as if the entire room had already decided who the problem was. Marcus and Malik didn't move. They'd seen this before. The spotlight, the suspicion, the way authority entered the room not to keep peace but to hunt. They sat steady, controlled, but inside, the familiar storm of frustration began to churn. IDs. Now. The demand snapped across the room. No greeting. No explanation. Just assumption. Marcus reached slowly into his pocket, every movement deliberate. He knew the rules, too quick, and it could be mistaken for a threat. Too slow, and it could be seen as defiance. Malik's jaw tightened, his fingers flexing against the table, but he followed his brother's lead. The officers didn't look at the IDs. Not really. They stared at the names, the faces, the brown skin, searching for something wrong. "Where are you from?" one asked, suspicion lacing every syllable. "Why are you here?" As if two black men in a bar needed justification. The bartender hovered, nervous. A few patrons whispered, shaking their heads, but no one spoke up. That silence, it cut deeper than the accusations. Because silence meant consent. Silence meant the twins were on their own. "Stand up." The command echoed. Chairs scraped as Marcus and Malik rose, hands visible, movements precise. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the smell of beer and sweat mixing with fear. Malik's voice was low, controlled. "Is there a problem, officer?" But asking the question only seemed to fuel the fire. The officer stepped closer, invading space, his hand brushing the grip of his weapon. The crowd leaned in. Everyone waiting. Everyone knowing how easily this moment could spiral into something irreversible. Marcus locked eyes with Malik, a silent reminder. Stay calm. Stay alive. But inside, his blood boiled. Here he stood, a captain who had commanded men in battle, reduced to a suspect in his own country. And Malik, a commander who had risked his life in missions no one in this bar could imagine, was treated like a criminal for daring to exist in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Empty your pockets." Another order. No warrant. No reason. Just power, pressed down because they could. The humiliation burned. The twins complied, each motion slow, each item placed on the table, keys, wallets, phones. Stripped of dignity piece by piece, in front of strangers who watched but did not act. And then, as if to break what little peace remained, one officer smirked. "Figures. Nothing on you, yet." The implication hung heavy, guilt was assumed, innocence impossible. Malik's chest rose with restrained fury. He'd endured grueling training, survived conditions meant to break men, led soldiers through fire and chaos. Yet here, none of that mattered. Here, his skin decided his worth. The crowd's silence was suffocating. Some looked away. Others stared, eyes wide with unease. But no one intervened. And then it happened, a push. The officer's hand pressed firmly against Malik's chest, a warning disguised as control. The bar gasped, but no one moved. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. "That's enough." It wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Years of command sharpened it into something that cut through the tension. The officer froze, taken aback for the briefest second, but then his partner moved, hand tightening on his weapon. Every heart in that room seemed to stop. The twins stood face to face with men who held authority, men who believed they had control. But beneath the uniforms and the threats, the truth remained unseen. These weren't just two young men. These weren't victims waiting to break. They were leaders. Warriors. Men who had defended a nation that now stood by in silence as they were humiliated. The officers didn't know the truth. Not yet. They didn't know whose hands they were trying to pin down, whose dignity they were trying to strip away. But they were about to find out. Because injustice has a way of revealing itself. And when power is abused, when prejudice is pushed too far, something breaks. And in that bar, in that charged silence, with fear pressing against every wall, the break was coming. The question wasn't if. It was when. The shove should have ended there. A petty show of dominance. A display of authority meant to humiliate, not protect. But it didn't stop. The officer pressed harder, pinning Malik against the table. The crowd gasped again, some flinching as if they were the ones being shoved. Glasses rattled. A chair toppled. And in that instant, the bar was no longer just a place to drink, it was a cage. Marcus reacted instinctively, his voice cutting like steel. Back off. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. Years of leadership condensed into 2 words. His body moved before his mind could catch up, stepping between his brother and the officer, chest squared, eyes burning. The officer's hand shot down to his holster. Fingers curled around the grip of his weapon. The crowd froze. The music had stopped. The room was nothing but shallow breathing and the unbearable tension of what could happen next. Malik's pulse hammered in his ears. He had faced gunfire before, explosions, enemies who wanted him dead. But this was different. Because here, survival wasn't about training or skill. It was about the fragile mercy of men who had already decided he was a threat. The officer sneered. Don't test me. His thumb brushed the holster strap. One flick away from disaster. Marcus felt his chest rise with rage, but he held it down. He knew one wrong move could seal their fate. His entire career, his discipline, every ounce of restraint he had cultivated, all of it focused on this one moment. And then, the words spilled out. Firm. Sharp. Controlled. You don't want to do this. The officer scoffed, laughing under his breath. The sound was cruel, mocking. Why's that? Marcus's voice didn't waver. Because the man you're holding is Commander Malik Johnson, United States Navy SEALs. And I am Captain Marcus Johnson. We've led men into battles you couldn't survive 5 minutes in. The bar went silent. Dead silent. The officer's smirk faltered, just slightly. His partner froze mid-step, eyes flicking between the 2 brothers as if the ground beneath him had shifted. The crowd gasped, whispers rippling through the room. But prejudice is a stubborn thing. It doesn't dissolve with truth. It resists it. The officer's jaw tightened. His hand still hovered over his weapon. And for one terrifying second, it seemed like even honor, sacrifice, service, wasn't enough to protect them. Malik's chest heaved, every muscle coiled. He stared into the officer's eyes, daring him to see the man behind the skin, behind the stereotypes, behind the prejudice. His voice, low and steady, broke the silence. You think this uniform makes you powerful. But power isn't in your badge, or your gun. It's in the choices you make when no one's watching. And right now, the whole world is watching. The crowd stirred. Phones lifted, cameras recording. People who had been silent found courage in that moment, documenting what was unfolding. Because evidence meant survival. Evidence meant truth. The officer hesitated, torn between ego and exposure. Between prejudice and fear of accountability. His fingers twitched, and then, slowly, reluctantly, he let go. Malik straightened, his chest rising as he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He didn't touch the officer. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough, calm, commanding, undeniable. Marcus joined him, shoulder to shoulder, the 2 brothers standing tall. Not just as victims. Not just as targets. But as men who had fought wars abroad only to come home and face one more dangerous, the war of perception. The bar exhaled in unison. The tension cracked, but it didn't vanish. Because the truth remained, they had been seconds away from tragedy. Seconds away from becoming another statistic. Another headline. And the question lingered, heavy and unbearable, what if no one had been watching? The officers backed away, their authority crumbling under the weight of exposure, of truth revealed. But the damage had already been done. The humiliation, the fear, the injustice, it clung to the air like smoke, choking, unshakable. Marcus and Malik stood in the center of the bar, hearts pounding, faces calm, but inside, the truth burned. They had fought for this country, bled for it, sacrificed pieces of themselves for it. And still, in the eyes of those sworn to protect it, they were nothing more than suspects. The worst part wasn't the shove. It wasn't the hand on the gun. It wasn't even the humiliation of being treated as less. It was knowing that their titles, their service, their sacrifices, all of it only mattered after they had to reveal it. That respect wasn't given freely. It had to be demanded. And that realization, that was the wound deeper than any bullet or battlefield scar. As the officers retreated, the bar buzzing with disbelief, one truth echoed in every mind present. If this could happen to them, men who had given everything for their country, what chance did anyone else have? The silence returned, heavier than before. And in that silence lay the turning point of their lives. Because survival tonight wasn't the victory. The real battle had only just begun. The officers left the bar with stiff shoulders and forced composure, but the silence they left behind was deafening. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the clinking of glasses hesitant, conversations hushed. It was as if everyone in that room knew they had just witnessed something bigger than a confrontation. They had seen a truth many prefer to ignore, and it couldn't be forgotten. Marcus and Malik stood there, breathing hard, their hearts still racing even as the immediate danger faded. Their hands trembled slightly, not from fear of the officers, but from the weight of what had almost happened. 2 lives, 2 careers, 2 legacies, nearly reduced to a headline, black men shot in bar after resisting police. It didn't matter that they were a captain and a commander. It didn't matter that they had risked their lives for the very freedoms those officers claimed to protect. In that moment, stripped of their uniforms and titles, they were simply black men in America. And that was enough to put targets on their backs. The crowd slowly returned to their drinks, but the shame lingered in the air. Some avoided eye contact, guilty of their silence. A few approached quietly, whispering apologies that felt too small, too late. And yet, even those whispered words carried weight, because acknowledgement is rare. Too often, stories like this end without witnesses willing to admit what they saw. For Marcus and Malik, the impact was deeper than embarrassment or anger. It was a confirmation of what they had always known. No matter how high they climbed, no matter what honors they earned, they were never immune. Racism wasn't a wall they could scale with rank or achievements. It was a tide, rising silently, waiting to pull them under. That night followed them long after the bar emptied. Marcus replayed the moment the officer's hand brushed his weapon, knowing how easily his brother's name could have been carved into a gravestone instead of history. Malik carried the sting of humiliation, the push, the orders, the smirk that dismissed his humanity. Both carried the exhaustion of knowing that survival had required restraint, composure, and a desperate hope that the truth would surface before tragedy struck. And yet, what haunted them most wasn't the officers. It was the silence. The people who watched and said nothing. The witnesses who only acted once cameras came out. That silence was a reminder that racism doesn't just live in uniforms or weapons, it lives in the choice to do nothing. But their story didn't end in that bar. It echoed outward, spreading through the whispers, the recordings, the retellings. It became more than a near tragedy, it became a reflection of a reality countless others face without the shield of rank or the benefit of an audience. Because if this could happen to a captain and a commander, what happens to those with no titles, no uniforms, no crowd to bear witness? What happens to the countless men and women who don't survive long enough to explain who they are? That is the real impact. Marcus and Malik walked away with their lives that night, but they carried scars invisible to most. And through their story, a truth shines harsh and undeniable. Racism doesn't care who you are, what you've achieved, or how much you've given. It strips dignity. It erases humanity. And it thrives in silence. So the question becomes, what will we do with this story? Will we dismiss it as just another incident, or will we let it crack open the comfort of denial? Will we look away, or will we finally look closer at a system that allows prejudice to hold power over justice? These brothers fought for their country on foreign soil, but at home, they faced a battle that no medal can shield them from. Their resilience, their survival, is a reminder that the fight against racism isn't fought on distant battlefields. It is fought here, in our neighborhoods, in our institutions, in the quiet moments where silence can either protect oppression or challenge it. And maybe that's the point of their story. It's not just about what happened in that bar. It's about what happens every day in streets, schools, workplaces, and homes. It's about how easily lives can be shattered by suspicion, by prejudice, by unchecked power. Their survival is not the ending. It's the beginning of a question that lingers long after the video fades. If silence protects oppression, then who will break it? Because change doesn't come from watching. It comes from speaking. From standing. From refusing to let fear or comfort outweigh justice. So ask yourself, if you had been in that bar, would you have stayed quiet, or would you have stood? The story of Marcus and Malik is a mirror, and the reflection staring back asks something of all of us. Will we look away, or will we finally face it?